Welcome to Taking the Myth, your topical skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is Iram of House Ramzan. Iram, how the F are you?
Stephen, I have had quite an experience in the kitchen.
What did you do? What's going on?
Well, I was making a smoothie in my blender, as you do.
Of course.
And I let it soak for a while, just so, it would be easier to wash later. And then after a few minutes, I don't know, I just run the tap and then, it exploded. Like the glass just shattered everywhere.
Well, it was switched on and blending, or when it was just on the side?
No, of course not. No, it was completely off and it was in the sink ready to be washed. Nothing was switched on.
Do you think the police are going to buy this? Are you mucking about with explosives in your kitchen?
Oh, ha, ha. Very funny.
I finally got the little C. Not the big C. That'd be horrible. Finally got COVID.
I was going to say, you are a little C.
Asked for that, didn't I?
You have a little C.
Yeah, I finally got COVID. I honestly thought I was going to get away with it because I've not been hiding. Like at every opportunity, as soon as pubs opened, as soon as I could go to the cinema, as soon as I could go away on little mini breaks, I've been on public transport. I've been letting people spit in my mouth, all sorts of stuff. And I haven't had it. And then right at the tail end, when everyone's kind of forgot we're in a pandemic and everyone's like moved on, I get COVID. What's all that about?
Well, I always did think you were a bit late when it came to certain trends.
That's it, isn't it? It's a late bloomer.
I think also there was this scientist, and I really wish I'd looked up her name now, but I think she got into trouble.
There's no lady scientist. Shut up.
I know, like unicorns, they're just an urban myth. So apparently, when someone said, why is it that some people just never get COVID? They've never had COVID. Is there something in their DNA? Do they have a really good immune system? What is it? And I think she said, it's probably because you have no friends, because you're not going out socializing or going anywhere. And she got into so much trouble for that. But actually, there is some truth in it. If you're not mixing with as many people, apart from letting people spit on you, obviously, and whatnot, then it just makes sense that you're not going to be exposed to it as much.
But I've literally been stood in football terraces in lower league football games, shoulder to shoulder with every big fat strange man in the northwest. I've been to concerts, I'm out all the time with it, and I just thought I had some sort of super DNA, and apparently not.
You're not special.
But I'm still testing positive. I know there's no legal requirement to isolate now, but I still feel bad about it. So I'm not going. I had to cancelled all my plans this bank holiday, and I'm devastated.
I mean, they do say. So it's been about 7 days for you, hasn't it? Is this day 8 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did say to you earlier, I think it was over Easter, you got it. Like Jesus, you will rise again, and
exactly.
You have risen. So I think, especially with your line being only faintly positive, I think, even if the rules were still in place, after about 7 days, your isolation would end. And it also depends how you feel. I mean, how are you feeling?
I feel fine now, apart from the little tickly cough every now and then. But I think that might just be a bit of irritation. But fuck it, COVID's boring, innit?
It really is, especially when I got it the second time around. I was just so bored because I wasn't even unwell, just symptomless, it was asymptomatic. And I thought, fuck this, is so inconvenient, God.
Well, it might be worth getting your attention on something now the dust has settled. Sorry, getting your opinion on something rather, now the dust has settled. But this was massive for a while, and it was quite shocking at the time, and there were strangely some very varied opinions on the topic, and that was our...
Is it Tinder swindler?
Tinder swindler? No, it was our Wiki Wild Wild West Will Smith getting a bit slap happy at the Oscars. Chris Rock, excellent comedian, on stage at the Oscars, did a little bit about Jada Pinkett that didn't go down too well with Will Smith. We've all seen it now. There's no point me describing it. But
I was in Turkey when it happened, and all I was reading about and hearing was Will Smith's slap. That slap went global.
It's strange because normally, for me, it's normally that would fall into the realm of celebrity tabloid
You're
feuds
above all that trivia.
It doesn't interest me, but it was kind of like the perfect distillation of all the things I love versus all the things I hate. So in the love column, stand-up comedy, comedian, something very pure about a man or a woman stood on stage with just a microphone telling jokes in front of an audience.
Yeah.
We all can talk about how powerful comedy is as a vehicle or a platform, or how it can just be entertainment, fun, light, whatever. And so that's in the love category versus everything I hate, which is violence in the direction of speech. And it seemed fairly clear cut to me. I assumed that everyone would be, well, that's bad. You can't do that, mate. You can't do that.
I don't think it was quite like that, though, was it?
No. So, I mean, so maybe coming out, I mean, I think we both agree that was bad. So I suppose, two-part question I've got for you here. And, if you don't know, you don't know. But first part would be, what explains the kind of person, the kind of idiot who tried to make excuses for that or even endorse it? And secondly, is a 10-year ban sufficient punishment from the Oscars, do you think?
Right, well, let's start with the latter. The Oscars are so shit now, so that being banned
Oscars
from them, that you just think, oh, well, it's actually a bit of a reward, to be honest with you. So, not much of a punishment, but for people in Tinseltown, it obviously is. And also, I was seeing quite a few people defending this slap and saying, oh, well, come on, he insulted the man's wife, he was just gone too far, comedy is about punching up, not punching down, the usual crap. And I just thought it was funny was when Ricky Gervais said, I wouldn't have made fun of her bald head or alopecia. I would have made fun of her boyfriend. It's funny because, they're supposed to have this so-called open marriage where she's going around sleeping with anyone she wants. And he's having to pretend that he's okay with it, which he's not, and he's clearly not, because look at the way he behaved at the Oscars. And they were all laughing about the joke before, and what was it? He called her G.I. Jane.
Yeah, that's a shit joke. I mean, that's a
G.I.
full-on 90s reference.
That's actually a compliment, really. I mean, you would want to be like G.I. Jane. I mean, if he compared it to, say, I don't know, like Jabba the Hutt or something, fine, but G.I. Jane's kind of cool. Jada Pinkett Smith is not cool, comes across as a very, unlikable woman. And you have to think, and obviously there are some people, particularly on the left, who are kind of defending this and saying, oh, standing up for his wife, blah, blah, blah. These kind of jokes are not funny. I mean, it's Chris Rock. What kind of jokes do you expect? It's like with Jimmy Carr when he made the joke about gypsies. I mean, so all the other jokes about rape and like incest or other kind of jokes that were really nasty, that they just were brushed to one side, but everyone focused on that line about gypsies. And you have to think to yourself, well, imagine if Rebel Wilson had made that joke and Will Smith had gone up and smacked her, would people have still been defending Will Smith?
Or if he had been
a white, or if he had been a white comedian, then what?
Yeah, luckily we didn't have to deal with the racial dynamics of it because it was two black people. But you touched on something interesting there inadvertently with the Ricky Gervais joke, because I kind of said at the time that, I mean, Will Smith's really fucked up on two fronts here. One, the violence in the direction of speech, unacceptable. Two, he's basically dangled a red rag in front of any comedian worth their salt now and said, I dare you to have a pop at my wife. And what do comedians do? What do comedians do? If they're told this is what you can't and mustn't joke about, and that's coming from someone who's, let's be honest, a bully, essentially, they're going to take up that challenge, aren't they? Obviously. So all we've had since that incident now, really, is wall-to-wall Jada Pinkett jokes.
Yeah.
Because comedians are saying, well, if this is the challenge, we're going to step up to it. So he's not helped his wife. He's certainly not helped his career. I mean, from what I'm reading at the minute, a lot of planned films which was due to star Will Smith have either been dropped now or put on the back burner. So, I mean, he was last spotted in India, was he not? Somewhere, maybe seeing some guru or something. Has he gone on some sort of, spiritual retreat to find himself? It's very LA, isn't it?
You don't need to find a guru, Will. You need to go find yourself a good divorce lawyer and get rid of G.I. Jane from your life. That's what he needs to do. Everybody knows it. Everyone knows it.
I'm bored of the whole thing, but there are people who are like, they're really trying to explain how offensive it is to have someone you love insulted. And I'm like, I get that, I understand that, but it's far more offensive to violently attack somebody for saying something you don't like.
I mean, he could have, when you got the Oscar, he could have just said, "Oh, by the way, Chris, joking about my wife, not cool, man, please don't do it, haha," and that's it. He didn't have to go up and slap him. I mean, just what an idiot. There were just so many good memes that...
Yeah, sometimes it's worth it just for the memes, isn't it? All right, so I've got one for you. Let's get the female perspective. And this headline
should be a good one.
Yeah, it comes courtesy of LBC. And the headline is, trans police officers who were born male but identify as female can search women. Not just like down the shops on the day off. That's, in the context of them carrying out their police duties, obviously. So women can be strip searched by transgender police officers who were born as men and could be accused of causing a hate incident if they refuse, it has been reported. These are new guidelines. So is it important, if you're to be strip searched as a woman, that you can stipulate a biologically female police officer? Why is that important, I suppose?
Oh, is this a serious question? Oh gosh, let me think why. This is just how ludicrous the whole debate has become about trans rights and trans issues, that a woman wanting only a woman to search her on a very personal level is something that is considered offensive now. How have we even reached this point? God, I genuinely don't know what to say, Stephen.
Let the biological man search you, otherwise you're a bigot. I suppose it ties into safeguarding, is it? Some of the most vulnerable women on planet Earth are women often incarcerated or in police custody for various reasons. Could be living rough, drug addicts, victims of domestic abuse, all sorts of things. And what I've found, people who engage in this conversation, the Gardenistas, I often find have never lived on planet Earth before, because many of them, to my amazement on Twitter, were arguing that the fact that the police can strip search someone anyway is ridiculous and should never happen. And it's like you've never had to see the dark underbelly of society, have you? You do not know the reasons why it's necessary for somebody in charge to perhaps carry out a strip search of somebody. Have you any idea where some prisoners sometimes smuggle razor blades?
Not personally, Stephen.
Yeah, so sometimes it's for their own safety to have certain things removed from them.
Also, how many transgender police officers are there going to be anyway? This is the thing. It's not like with, say, gay and lesbian people who, while they're a minority, they're quite a sizable minority in a population. Whereas, how many trans people do you ever come across in real life?
Well, not many, but enough to send the entire planet fucking mental about how we perceive safeguarding and biological sex and sports.
It's just the rights of people who say that they're transgender are being used to erode the legally protected rights of women. These are rights that are enshrined in law. Like the right to have separate spaces for men and women. Like for example, having women's shelters as well. These are places where vulnerable women should be able to get together and feel safe. But if somebody comes there and says, "Oh well, I identify as a woman," can you then say, well, actually, no, you can't have access to the space? And, you know, in any other context as well, you know, if a man forced a woman to undress, a biological man forced a woman to undress and started touching her in intimate areas without her consent, he'd be guilty of sexual assault, you know? So it's equally outrageous that any woman then who objects to being strip searched by a biological man could then be accused of a fucking hate crime. Because that's the thing, if you object to that, you're being hateful, you're being prejudiced, and I'd be like, well, go fuck yourself. You know, I'm sorry, but, you know, these are rights that are enshrined in law. My rights as a woman should not come at the expense of, well, trans rights shouldn't come at the expense of women's rights. And I just think, you know, is the pendulum starting to swing the other way? There have been some cases now. There was a cycling one, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, but the sports trans woman who wanted to compete in British cycling, I think it was. You'll have to dig out the name later on, but I'm just thinking, is this the year in which people start to say, well, enough is enough, and they're starting to push back now after so long?
I know what you're referring to. I forgot the name of the trans cyclist. Something Bridges, wasn't it? Emily Bridges, that's her. Right, so she's biologically male, competes as a woman, has all the size, strength differences. Male puberty is the difference, essentially. So, I mean, the headlines on this, they were very dishonest at the time. So, basically, the British Cycling have said that trans women cannot compete in elite female events. And all the headlines were trans women banned from cycling.
But no, not quite.
No, you can still compete just in the biological category. The same as me. I can't compete against women. So, I mean, this touches on the problem we have here when you brought up self-ID, is the fact that we were not even able to pin down the criteria to be a trans person in any objective manner. So you have to make this assumption that anyone that says they are trans are legitimately trans. That's what self-ID promises. And from there, you have to accept everything that made me a potential risk, and we'll touch on that in a moment, to women, suddenly dissipates or disappears because I've said something out loud. I've identified as a different sex. It's funny because whenever you talk about trans people in toilets and things like that, people push this idea that you're trying to say that trans people are all deviants or rapists in waiting. And I don't feel that anyone's saying that about me when I'm not allowed in the women's room. That's not how safeguarding works. It's about closing the window for potential opportunists. We've decided that there are enough dangerous men in the population that pose a significant threat to women that we put safeguarding in to just try and mitigate it as much as we can. And one way you do that is by ensuring single-sex spaces. I'm cool with that. I don't think I'm a threat to a woman, but it's not about me. I can't then turn around and exempt myself from that very policy by saying, actually, I'm a woman. Any concerns you had about me before have suddenly gone up in smoke because I said the magic words.
The thing is, I just can't believe they came out with this policy, because you think, how on earth is this going to ensure that women have any trust in the police? And you've got all these dim-witted plods across the country who so desperate to avoid being smeared as transphobic that they're trying to show support for a group that doesn't even make up 0.5% of the population.
Here's something interesting for you. I went to an event in Manchester several weeks ago, organised by A Woman's Place. That's the name of the group. And we got in there in this building, and there's a number of guest speakers, and they all basically spoke about upholding the law, spoke about the erosion of women's sports, about single-sex spaces. Trans was barely mentioned. They just wanted to keep reiterating their rights as they stand. And outside was a several hundred strong group of protesters rainbow flags, shouting about Nazis. They were shouting so loud at times from outside this building I was in that I couldn't hear the speaker with a microphone speaking. We had a refugee woman talking about FGM and how important single-sex spaces are for her and people from her culture who have been victims of male violence to be able to be in a safe. If you're going to have a safe space for anyone, it's got to be victims of violence. I would suggest. And guess what? The protesters outside were chanting as the police were keeping them safe. The police that release pictures of their rainbow mobiles and wear the trans pins out on patrol to say we support our community. They was chanting all cops are bastards, basically. These are far left fucking Marxists. They hate the police. My larger point here is every single person who spoke at this event are on video recorded. All these videos are online now. I'll put them in the show notes. It would be amazing to sit down with these protesters and say, okay, so you were shouting about fascists and Nazis. Can you pinpoint exactly where any of these speeches crossed over to that line? I mean, these people aren't speaking. Do you think you could get some far lefty, purple-haired, trans women or women shouting activists to sit down and speak to a middle-aged feminist and find common ground?
Oh my God. Can you imagine if this was an all-male event happening? Would you get the same sort of protesters outside? No. It just seems like everything comes at the expense of women's rights. And, the police historically, they've never really made women feel quite safe, especially in the light of this whole Sarah Everard case where her killer was an actual police officer as well. So confidence and trust in the police is quite low. And then now the police are trying so hard to accommodate trans people at the expense of women. It just shows you how much disrespect there is for women's rights, even basic rights like having their own frigging spaces. It just never comes at the expense of men's spaces. It's always women's.
It might actually, now we're talking about police and the way that trust is eroded, I think it might be worth just taking a brief digression. I'm not sure if you've heard of this story, but it relates very much to the UK's ridiculous rules on public offence and speech, how it pertains either digitally or in person. But I don't know if you remember back in 2018, some idiots in the London area filmed themselves burning a cardboard mock-up recreation of Grenfell Tower. That was a big flat that burned tragically in the UK. It was accidental, but many people perished, and it was quite, wall-to-wall coverage of it. Emotions were quite high at the time. And a group of idiots in London burned a cardboard mock-up of it on a bonfire whilst, shouting, fairly offensive things like, that's what happens when you don't pay the rent. It was described as abhorrent, and I kind of agree. It's not my cup of tea. I very much doubt these are the kind of people I'd be friends with or associate with. And if you want to level any criticism at them you like, you can do. But they were arrested and charged for this. It was a crime. Bear in mind, they burned their own property on their own property. I think the problem was it somehow ended up online, but they were described by the magistrate as grossly offensive to almost everybody who has an ounce of decency. I suppose that's fair.
Well, I mean, yeah.
Should it be a crime?
Okay, should you be arrested for coming out with something quite gross like that? No, I mean, you'd probably arrest about 80% of the population then if if that's the bar. What an absolute waste of police time. But yeah, as we've just been discussing, police are, all about wasting their time now. Don't really go after serious crime or criminals.
He got sentenced to 10 weeks in prison. It's suspended, so he won't actually serve any time. But he's been convicted. This man, he's burnt a piece of cardboard in his fucking garden. If you want to be objective about it, it's the same as that guy who sent the tweet, that Scottish guy who sent the either a tweet or a Facebook post about Sir Captain Tom Moore.
Oh, yeah.
He got convicted of a hate crime. It's just, and sure, I know the word nuance gets thrown around a little bit, but there's no actual nuance. People can't understand that you can say that what that guy did was pretty horrible, but it's probably not something you should be arrested for. What is this desire to have everyone that offends you punished by the state? Can you think of many other places on planet Earth where you'd like to live, where the state has that sort of power? England's a bit of a weird one in that sense. It seems free and liberal, but there are like hundreds of people a year, arrested for tweets.
Well, let that be a lesson for you, Stephen. Never burn cardboard.
When I see things like this, it does make me so angry to the point where just out of pure solidarity, I'm gonna get the old sticky back plastic out and the cornflakes packet and make me a Grenfell.
Oh dear!
But and see, it's not even something I believe. It's not, I hate mocking tragedy in that way. It's not my cup of tea. But I'm so much more fucking offended by the fact that the plod can knock on your door and cart you off, and you could nearly end up in jail. Am I going insane, or is this proper George Orwell shit here?
It really is. I mean, I get that something like that would, it is seen as abhorrent. It is pretty nasty thing to do. I mean, it sounds like an utter dickhead who'd come out with a joke like that. I mean, people died, for fuck's sake. But would I?
72 people.
Yeah. Would I? Does he deserve to be arrested for that? No. Does he deserve to be, shouted at by his friends and neighbours? Yeah, probably. This is not something that the police should be getting involved in. Absolutely not.
I mean, it is almost like a secular blasphemy law, this kind of hate speech criteria we have, which is so ill-defined and unobjective. And it is a case of what do we feel strongly about at the time? What's the thing? I mean, you could have... look at it this way. Nobody is arresting you for getting a model of the Titanic and smashing it into an iceberg whilst laughing, because a significant amount of time has passed since the tragedy, which I'm sure many Brits died on, the Titanic, but that's acceptable. So why is that not offensive anymore? Because it's not in the public consciousness? What are the rules? And we can't really start saying how unreasonable fanatical Islamists are with the Prophet Muhammad and cartoons if we're sending people to prison for, say, burning a poppy or mocking an army veteran or setting fire to a London flat mocked up out of cardboard. It all feels like one and the same thing to me. I don't think we can say our Islamists are a bit unreasonable for going mental about cartoons, but definitely it's reasonable to jail people for burning cardboard or a poppy. All feels one and the same to me.
It's just, like I said, we live in strange times indeed.
All right, well, talking of strange times, back to the trans shit, which I noticed when I was going through my topics. What I tend to do is over the weeks, if something catches my eye, something that's either seems like it's entirely ideological or it transgresses on free speech, that goes on my little list to talk about. But of late, 9 times out of 10, the story's got something to do with trans people. So I'm going to read you a headline from the Mail online. Iram should feel at home. So Monsoon, and that's a women's clothes shop in the UK. Monsoon apologises. Womackson, yeah. Monsoon apologises to non-binary shopper after they were stopped from trying on prom dresses because of their gender assigned at birth. So Charlie Moore, 18 years of age, they went in the Monsoon ladies' clothes shop looking for a prom dress. When did prom get big over here, by the way?
Oh, well, it started when we had our prom, so they've been going on for a while now, believe me.
So they are looking for a dress. This is a biological male looking for a dress for their prom, and they tweeted online that they were refused access to the changing rooms because of their assigned gender. So basically, if you're looking at it objectively, i.e., through the lens of reality, Charlie Moore, born male, biologically male, remains biologically male, from their profile images I've seen online, presents as biologically male, was refused access to female changing rooms and kicked off about it. Now, I would like to see a female shopping outlet especially just say, yeah, we're single spaces, women only, apologies for any inconvenience. That'll go down pretty well with their main clientele, I would have thought.
Yeah.
But what they did is say, we are terribly sorry about that. If you'd like to come back into one of our stores, we will allow you to try on our dresses. As a matter of fact, this one's on us. Have it on the house. So, Iram, how do you feel about that?
Wow. So while I can get ripped off at Monsoon, some, Charlie non-binary can just walk in and say,
Charlie non-binary.
Charlie non-binary can just go on Twitter, moan that they were allowed to go into a female changing room and then get a free dress for that. I mean, what absolute pillocks they are at Monsoon. I mean, you're one complaint on Twitter and you capitulate and give this person a free dress. I mean, fuck's sake. You're like you pointed out earlier, this is a women's clothes shop and they're at risk of alienating the majority of their core clientele. So why are why are women's hurt feelings never taken into account? Why is it only Charlie's feelings that are taken into consideration here?
They sent 3 or 4 grovelling tweets to Charlie Day. Monsoon also ignored every single concerned woman tweeting them saying, well, can you clarify your policy? Am I going to see biological men in the changing rooms now? So, I mean, just to be clear, I did paraphrase the tweets earlier. Our Charlie on Twitter, tweeted out, "Hi Monsoon, just been into your Birmingham store to try on a couple of prom dresses, but was told I wasn't allowed because of my gender assigned at birth. Could you confirm if this is company policy? Thanks." Now, first thing to touch on is this whole idea of gender assigned at birth. Gender isn't assigned at birth, gender is observed. Now, there is some NHS guidance that talks about when dealing with people who are suffering from gender dysphoria or have some issues with their gender, use that term as, if they're going to be triggered or made to feel dysphoric by referring to their biological sex as a matter of fact, use the language of gender assigned at birth. I'm fine with that. I think medical professionals have a duty of care to deal with a patient's, physicality and psychology, whatever helps them. That's good. But it's becoming standard now, isn't it, to talk about gender assigned at birth. We all have to pretend that you pop out of your mother and they have to, have a 20-minute discussion or flip a coin or get out some really intricate scanning and it's like, no, that's a girl, that's a boy, and 99.9 whatever % of the time it is perfectly accurate and fine. But we're all being told now to pretend that's not how it goes down. Forget biology, forget everything. Any midwife on the planet knows, or any doctor delivering babies, or
any
whatever.
5-year-old would bloody tell you.
Well, you say that, but they're starting to release books now aimed at that audience, saying that. I think one came out the other day. There was screenshots of it all on Twitter where it was a case of the doctors make a guess because they don't know what they don't know, you don't know yet, and maybe they don't know, kind of thing. So they have to do, they have to guess as to your gender or sex, and it's like, fucking hell, why are we pretending this is the norm? But anyway, I digress. So Monsoon sent 3 tweets back. The official Monsoon account says, "Hi Charlie." I mean, this is indicative of how desperate brands are to be seen as A, ultra progressive and pro-trans, or B, not get labelled as transphobic. They're either terrified or they think it's good business sense. They've tweeted out, Hi Charlie, we're sorry to hear of the experience you had in one of our stores. Our fitting rooms are open and available to all our customers, and we have opened an investigation into this incident. Serious business. We'd like to explore this further with you, so could you please give us an email so we can find out more of your experience. If you would be comfortable to do so, we would like to welcome you back into our store where we would be happy to help you find your perfect prom dress, and it's on us. Everyone deserves to feel magical for prom, so we hope this gets your prom journey on the right foot again and hope you find something you love.
I want a free dress, Stephen. Where do I get my free dress from?
I suppose my question is, and this ties back into you earlier saying you think the tides are turning. I sort of tentatively agree with that. At least I want to believe that. But I suppose my question is, what is more sensible for this brand? Would it be A, to grovel to Charlie Day and flex their pro-trans credentials, which is what they did do, or would it be B, to reiterate their single-sex changing room policy and potentially reassure their already existing customer base, which obviously predominantly biological women? What's the best move from a business perspective?
I would have gone with C, which was just fucking ignore Charlie Day. But if I have to go with A or B, I'd go with B.
B. I think, to be honest, I think not acknowledging it is probably this smart move there, because then you don't rustle any feathers. You potentially lose a customer of one.
a non-customer. I mean, come on, this is someone who's shopping for their school.
No, it's
prom.
non-binary.
But also, I mean, could Charlie, they being a high school student, could they really afford a Monsoon dress? I mean, they are pretty expensive. I'd say they're overpriced for what you actually get. And they're always built for tall people as well. But then Charlie is biologically male, so maybe that wouldn't be a problem. But yeah, what a great tactic to get a free dress when you probably know you can't afford to actually shop at Monsoon. Sorry, am I being a bit mean there?
No, I think that's fair. But also, I mean, I'm not saying this is true, but there's also the possibility of this being a political stunt as well. There are a few people now who are trying to find out where the boundaries are and going for it. I
wonder if this was just some massive joke on Charlie's part and this never actually happened. And I was like, oh, we just managed to get a free dress. Whoa. I wouldn't be surprised. But you're right, you do occasionally get people on Twitter who just randomly, you see them target some shop or company and then unfortunately they fall for the bait. They take the bait. So yeah.
Talking of taking bait, there is a master troller on Twitter, just happens to be probably the most richest man on planet Earth, and that's Elon Musk, a very interesting and unique individual, I'm sure we can agree, but he has recently attempted to put in an offer to take over Twitter, and I keep reading this number and I can't quite fit it all in my head. It's 46.5 billion. That's quite a lot, isn't it?
It's like loose change for Elon.
Yeah, so I think he wants to buy Twitter. I suppose the debate comes down to, because he's very pro free speech, or at least that's what he says. Whether he's got a full and reasoned understanding of the concept is a different question. Everyone seems to be for free speech until someone crosses their line, it seems. So I suppose the question is, if Elon Musk did take over Twitter, would that be a good or a bad thing?
Oh, I mean, I can't see how him owning Twitter is going to be good for free speech. I mean, I guess, his argument or his supporters saying that big tech is too censorious, that in this day and age, and it disproportionately censors conservatives or feminists who speak out against trans bigots. But this idea that Elon Musk is going to save free speech, I don't know. I think it's the problem with big tech. it's not necessarily the wrong types of people censoring and controlling the speech. It's that, the people have ended up, well, these people who own it have ended up with the power to censor speech in the first place. And I can't really see that Elon Musk is going to be some sort of billionaire savior. I think I was reading somewhere about his employees at Tesla who've been fired for trying to unionize, for disagree with Musk, and for reporting harassment, I think it was. And he might seem libertarian supposedly on this issue, but is he really on other issues? Is he some sort of... I think the Wall Street Journal described him as some sort of high-profile cheerleader of China's ruling Communist Party. So I don't know if... I think it's because of something he tweeted last year and said, the economic prosperity that China has achieved is truly amazing. And you just think, is he really going to champion free speech? And what if someone decides to come out with something that's anti-communist, Chinese communist government, then what? Would he still be defending them? I don't know.
It's a minefield. I think it's a poison chalice, to be honest. I don't think that the current Twitter safety team, or whatever they term it, I think they are left-leaning progressives. I don't think they realise how political some of their decisions are. I mean, it was distilled, I don't know if you heard about, I think it's probably 2019 now, a Canadian blogger called Megan Murphy. She tweeted out on Twitter, and this is all she tweeted. She tweeted out, "Men aren't women," which is brilliant. That's brilliant. I mean, that men aren't women, but as we all know,
they are.
There's a massive push on the progressive left to say, men can be women. As a matter of fact, women can have big fat dongs. And she got banned from Twitter. Twitter banned her for that because it was perceived as spreading hate in the direction of a marginalised group, i.e. trans people. So the powers that be at Twitter don't realise that that's not a politically neutral decision. They're making the claim there, or at least the way in which they're acting suggests they have decided that, in matter of fact, men can be women. Whereas to me, that is and still should remain an open debate. That's right at the heart of all the concerns that gender-critical feminists have, safeguarding spaces, sports. Whether or not a man is legitimately a woman should be up for debate, and it's not hateful to do that. But Twitter have decided that's a done deal and banning people. So I think what Elon's promising, and I don't think he's got a particularly strong grasp of free speech. I watched the latest TED Talk with him, and he asked some very good questions by the interview, and he didn't really seem to... He couldn't quite say where that line was between sort of free speech. Where does it cross over into incitement to violence? When does it cross over into harassment? Where are the lines? He didn't really seem to have a good answer for that, which is fine. These are tricky things. He's not a philosopher. But he did seem to suggest that he would be more transparent in regards to their policies. You could see how and why someone was either limited or blocked or banned. And I think that's half the battle with Twitter, isn't it? People just get, poof, into thin air, and you get some very vague comment about terms of services, and you can never really find out exactly what it was they said that crossed the line.
You've definitely crossed a few lines, haven't you, on Twitter?
Well, no, that's the weird thing, because I always get, I used to get banned all the time. I used to appeal. It was always under the guise of something like targeted harassment and abuse. They'd never say I was guilty of it.
Sorry, I think I reported you without thinking.
That's the thing. It is a lot of the time, it is people mass reporting accounts, and Twitter automatically doing it, and then you appeal and they overturn it, or at least they did with me a number of times. So, is it possible? I mean, because here's the headache you've got. It's not just a case... If you want to own Twitter and pay that much money to own it, you have to make money with it. And Twitter, it's not very good at making money. However, it does make money in several territories across the world, each with their own esoteric and unique speech laws. So what flies in America could be prosecutable in Europe or Saudi or China.
Exactly, yeah.
And you have to say, well, okay, we will listen to the CCP and bow to their demands, but not this country or that country. So at some point, you've got to decide. You've got to choose business over free speech if you own that company.
That's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I do worry about the future when it comes to free speech and censorship, and it looks like we'll probably have more censorship, which is quite worrying.
You know what they should do? They should do like a Twitter version of The Purge or something where they say, okay, here's an experiment. We're just going to be the wild, wild west for a fortnight. Say what you want to anyone about anything. Throw the N-word around like it's confetti. Fill your boots and nothing will happen to you. And it'd be interesting to see whether society collapses and the sky falls or whether everyone just goes about their normal business anyway. I'm kind of like an anything goes person when it comes to speech, but what if somebody posts someone's address, you know what I mean, or puts them in danger?
But that's not necessarily free speech. You're clearly crossing the line there, and most people would agree with that something like that is wrong. Was it J.K. Rowling's address that got posted online once, or somebody else's? But I've seen incidents of that happening where someone's address has been posted online, and you could tell that person's address has been posted so that they can be targeted. Now that obviously is a crime if you're intending to harass somebody or put them in danger, and that isn't a free speech issue. It becomes something a lot more sinister.
Yeah, and there's definitely a power dynamic in terms of the internet. I mean, a while back, I'm sure you remember, Donald Trump was banned from Twitter, and Sam Harris, who I'm a huge admirer on, he was in favour of that decision, and I wasn't. I don't think you can ban the President of the United States from Twitter. But Sam made a good point on his podcast that there's a difference between me saying something horrible and untrue about somebody on Twitter versus the President of the United States and how much harassment and threat and danger that invites. I mean, you could look at somebody like even Fauci recently. We were saying that he has to have security now, and he gets constant death threats. And in fact, some guy was apprehended driving the country with a gun to kill him not so long ago, and a lot of this comes down to a lot of the Republican candidates and politicians just spreading so much hate about him online. It whips up people into a fury. So I'm not going to pretend it's an easy thing. I don't think you could pay me enough money to own Twitter, is what I'm getting at. The only reason to buy it would just be like, yeah, I've got it. Then where's the delete button? Can we just shut this shit down now, please?
Oh, that would be interesting.
What else can we finish with now that isn't trans related?
Terrorism?
Yeah!
I mean, this is a case that kind of sort of came and went in a way. Ali Harbi Ali, the Somali guy, originally from Somalia, his family were anyway. This is the man who killed, or murdered rather, the Conservative MP Sir David Amess last year. I mean, do you remember when that happened and how shocking that was? I mean, I'll be honest, I hadn't really heard of Sir David Amess before he was stabbed at his constituency surgery, but yeah, anyway, so he was stabbed by this man who I think about a week or so ago found guilty at his trial, which is obviously the right judgment to make. But what was interesting about this whole thing was on trial when he was on the stand, he just said that he was talking about the Prevent, Britain's counter-terrorism programme, and he said that he knew exactly what to say and how to behave when dealing with representatives from Prevent. And, Prevent is, and we've discussed it quite a few times, the aim of it is to combat extremists and fanatics of all backgrounds, whether they're Islamist or far right. And apparently, when he was referred to Prevent, I think he'd been dismissed as a terrorist threat just months before he actually bought a knife so he could hunt down MPs, so he could actually stab someone.
Who was it he originally was targeting? Was it?
There was Michael Gove was one of them.
That's it, yeah. Am I being really cynical here? And it's not a competition, obviously, but it feels to me like everyone was annoyed about this for a day and then dropped it. Whereas when Joe Cox, Labour MP, was murdered in similar fashion by, I think he's a far right, this is something that had legs for, years and years. It's all we heard about. It was referenced constantly in terms of, dialing down the climate in terms of rhetoric and all sorts of things. Whereas this David Amess thing, it just feels like the same sort of people who were concerned about this sort of thing haven't been as vocal.
I feel like that. It's sort of, like I said, it kind of came and went. People were saddened and they were shocked for maybe a few days, and then you heard nothing about it until the trial, which is fair enough because, you don't want to say anything that prejudices
That's a good point,
trial.
Actually. We have some laws, don't we, that prevent us from speaking as openly as we may like.
We do. But it's like you've said, I mean, we've had the trial, he's been found guilty, and yet there hasn't been that much commentary surrounding this, has there? You haven't had the constant barrage of articles that were talking about, lessons must be learned, blah, blah, blah. And all that people seem to want to focus on was how we must all be kinder to each other online and not say nasty things because otherwise you can get stabbed. Well, that's not why Sir David Amess was stabbed to death. This guy went out seeking MPs to kill as quote-unquote revenge for airstrikes in Syria. That was his motive. Not like, oh, he trolled me on Twitter, I'm going to go out and stab someone. I mean, seriously, this man was murdered by an extremist, and we're all talking about how we must be kinder to each other online. And there was not much commentary on the murder. I mean, there was a little bit about the Prevent programme and what a failure it is, and you can argue whether that is the case or not, but people who are arguing that it's a failure are usually doing it from the point of view that, it's disproportionately targeting Muslims and it's racist when it really is not. But aside from that, why was David Amess's murder seen as less newsworthy or less important than Joe Cox's murders? The papers, news websites, the suggestion from the lack of commentary was that his murder was less important, and the thing is, sometimes you get a sense of people's beliefs or values, not just in what they say, but what they don't say, and sometimes it's what's not said that can be more revealing than what is said. And the fact that Ali Harbi Ali's life sentence didn't really get much traction just tells you everything. You had Lee Rigby's horrific murder in public by a religious fanatic, and that obviously got a lot of response for that, quite rightly so. And then you had Joe Cox's murder, and then since then silence, and it does make you think sometimes, if this had been a far-right terrorist, would that have had more of a response? I don't know.
I think there was more in the air, discussion-wise, condemnation, when that chap in Portsmouth killed his mum and a few other people on the street. Turned out to be like a domestic that had spilled over, tragically. People were so desperate to make that about incel culture and white supremacy and terrorism, and it just wasn't. Whereas when we have a cast iron example of actual terrorism with a clear-cut ideological motive, if it's not the right motive, if it doesn't help my sort of left-wing pet projects, I'm not interested. I think what's worth mentioning as well, how utterly disgusting it was to see fucking bunch of Tories in Parliament debating the digital harms bill on the back of this. Using it as a springboard to bring in more harsh speech laws. If you'd have tuned into that, you would have had to have assumed someone had hashtagged David Amess to death, because that's how they were talking about it. They were talking it very matter-of-factly that if you could just control what people say online about politicians, they wouldn't be stabbed to death. And I can't make... How are they making that link? There is no reason whatsoever to suggest social media had anything to do... And as a matter of fact, the killer themselves has been quite explicit about their motives. If we could have shut down Twitter, would that have made any difference? Absolutely not. It's silly, and it worries me that instead of saying maybe we should crack down on, jihadi ideology and influences, but it's once again a case of always looking in the wrong places when the obvious causes and reasons are far too taboo or risky for people to talk about. It's just not. It's a cost-benefit analysis people do, don't they? It's a case of, what will I get if I vocally oppose white supremacy and go to town on the far-right extremists? People will give you claps and likes and say what a wonderful person you are. What if I stick the boot in Islamist ideology, whereas a lot of the time the suspects are non-white, often not British, but given it's a global issue, might get called a racist. People might unfriend me. There is that kind of thing where you pick and choose where you apply your principles depending on the skin colour and ideology involved, which makes no sense to me at all.
I just hope Ali Harbi Ali being given a whole life sentence provides at least some sort of comfort to Sir David Amess's family. I know nothing can really change what has happened, and they'll never truly get over it, but him being behind bars for a very, 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 very long time, I hope that's at least something to them.
From what I've read about the man, like you, I was not familiar with him up until this tragic murder, but he seemed like somebody who was always engaging with his constituents, and obviously that was, in the end, what made him accessible. I think there were some reports that his killer had posed as somebody who worked for the NHS, so he'd even played on that kind of... I mean, as you know already, like, the NHS is almost a national religion where we all have to praise it and stand at the doorstep and clap for it during the pandemic, if you remember. To level any criticism that way publicly is a big no-no. The NHS is amazing, we should all be grateful for it, and we should all pretend the Tories want to sell it. I think they're the only acceptable positions. But so there's a lot of good faith publicly directed towards the NHS, and he pretended to work for the NHS, I believe, to gain access to this meeting, this surgery, and I think that's what did it. So he, like he said, he knew how to play prevent, he knew how to play the public mood, it was very calculated. Once again, demonstrating that Islamists aren't just thick Four Lion-esque.
I was just gonna say they're not like Wadj from Four Lions. Yeah. All of them. I mean, some of them really are. It's quite. Sure. It's quite shocking how some of them are, like that Blackburn terrorist. Oh my God. But some of them are, as you pointed out, very, very calculating and sinister. And I just wonder when. Yeah, at what point did we stop taking all this seriously? Nobody really talks about Islamist extremism anymore, do they?
Have we nailed it for 1 week? Do we need to cover anything else? Do I need to check Twitter for questions? Did we get any questions?
I don't even know if we've got any questions, fuckers.
Chris has sent us... actually, Simon Evans has asked... Is the gender pendulum swinging back towards sanity? I do not want to think about swinging pendulums in the context of gender. Thank you very much.
Oh, do you know, I hadn't even thought about it in that way. What a dirty mind you have.
Filth.
Absolutely filthy.
It's a great question, Simon. I believe we've touched on it a little bit. And my honest answer is, I don't know. It's very difficult for me to be objective because I feel like I'm somewhat in the middle of it. So I'm going to have a skewed perception because it consumes a lot of my time. But I think... there are certainly more. I mean, if you want to look at recent decisions by British Cycling and the responses a lot of places are getting for failing to adhere to single-sex spaces, I think that's definitely some suggestion that more people are fed up with it. What do you think?
I think I can't say this without laughing. The pendulum might well be swinging the other way. It's starting.
Yeah, mate, you can't swing your pendulums in here, pal.
Yeah, go on, do one.
Chris is clairvoyant. He's asked us, is Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter good or bad? Nailed that, Chris. Has the tide turned against trans swimmers and cyclists? Nailed that, Chris. Oh, this is a good one we haven't touched on. Does Putin... Is it? We're back to this again. It's Putin. Putin, god damn it.
The shit tin.
Shit tin. God. Does shit tin have a medical condition?
Oh my god, we were literally discussing this a few days ago. Someone was saying that if you look at a video of him recently, his arm or his leg is shaking really badly, and that might be a sign of Parkinson's. But I'm not a medical expert, so I really can't say. But as a non-expert, I'm just gonna say, yeah, he does.
He's getting on a bit. I mean, but I'm not really a big fan of these body language experts that can tell you a million things about the way someone's. Somebody did it to what? Can you remember our Douglas Murray interview that we did together?
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, I got held up in traffic or something, and I had to, like, the last 5 minutes of coming to meet you, I had to run, and I was a little bit flustered, and I had one of your hairs was stuck on my forehead somehow. I still haven't figured out the logistics of that. But moving on, and I'm sat down on this video, and just before it starts, I left a little bit of the preamble in where we were just chatting, and I'm there, and I'm kind of wiping my forehead just to try like get the shine off it, and I can feel something stick to me, and I can I'm trying to get comfortable, and some guy analysed that and took it as me having some sort of hatred for Douglas Murray. I'm so uncomfortable in his presence that I'm fidgeting, I'm this and that. I'm like, I'm trying to get a fucking hair off my forehead. And like,
I'm trying to get this bloody Pakistani hair off my forehead. So racist. Oh, does my hair cringe you that badly?
But so it's one of them things where you're like, when something's stuck and you're not sure what it is, and you're pulling and you're pulling and you're pulling, it's not coming off.
It's just hair, love. Okay, that's what I tell them all.
That was one of the most relaxing and informal little, like, it was fine. Like, I'm obviously a big fan of Douglas Murray as well, so it's like, but it's just weird to have somebody analyse my body language and make all these amazing pronouncements of it, and at the end of the day, I'm just trying to get loose hair off my head.
But I don't think Putin was trying to get hair off something. And I don't think he was nervous about meeting Douglas Murray or meeting me. So I think we can rule that out. This is, I think,
AIDS. He's got AIDS. You heard it here first. Putin has AIDS. I'm just going to put that out there. If you've got this far, that's your hashtag.
God.
Putin has AIDS.
We're so getting murdered by a Novichok. Is it Novichok or Novikov? No, Novikov's a restaurant. Oops.
Novichok.
We're going to get Novichoked. Fuck's sake.
We are going to get Novichoked, aren't we?
Right, I need to go write a will now.
Right, this is a great question. Chris has asked all the good questions today. Is there anything
can you stop hogging the questions?
Yeah, I know, but I mean, he's doing a better job than me, basically. Is there anything that Boris Johnson would consider a resigning issue? That's a great fucking question.
That is a great question. No.
No is the answer. Obviously, I don't know what he needs to. Okay, murder. That's it, isn't it?
I think a video needs to come out showing Boris kicking a dog. I think.
Yeah.
I think that would do it.
Animal abuse or murder. Because, I mean, I think the dog thing's perfect. I think even if he did murder someone, he'd be like, I am very sorry.
I didn't know murder was wrong.
I was not aware of the rules. I felt I was fully complying with the rules. So murder or kicking a dog. Will Manchester see the sun this year? Nope. What was your experience with COVID like? Nailed that. It's done that already. I think we're done.
Who just nailed everything.
And if I can leave you with one thought, it would be that Putin has AIDS.
Yes. In case you don't hear from me again because Stephen's got us killed by the Russians, I'd just like to say it was such a pleasure doing this podcast. Well, okay, pleasure's quite a strong word. It was all right. It was all right doing this podcast for all these years. I've had a good innings.
Iram, it has been an absolute pleasure.